I sat in my room stunned and confused. What had just unfolded in our home was enough to shake me to my core. It had only been 2 months since my marriage, and yet the act my father-in-law had committed with a woman was enough to make the ground slip from under my feet. Her family had stormed into our house, turning everything upside down with their outrage. Early that morning, I woke up to the sound of loud male voices echoing through the house. Alarmed, I quickly grabbed my dupatta and stepped outside. Right in front of me were my husband and his younger brother, trying to negotiate and calm the furious men. Meanwhile, my father-in-law sat silently in a corner, avoiding all eye contact. I was bewildered, trying to understand what was going on. But as the conversation continued, the tone of those men grew increasingly hostile, and then the truth hit me like a slap. I was in utter disbelief. My father-in-law, he had sexually assaulted a woman. He had ruined her life, and now her family had come to demand justice, or retribution. And there stood my husband, trying to justify his father's crime. I was appalled. A part of me wanted to scream at my husband, to shake him and tell him how wrong he was. But I felt powerless. I knew that if I spoke even a word against his father, I would be thrown out of the house. Our entire household revolved around my father-in-law. His wealth, his grand mansion. It was enough to silence both my husband and his brother. Just as my husband was about to say something further, my father-in-law suddenly stood up and spoke with cold finality. "If this is such a big problem for all of you, then I am ready to marry your sister. There's no need to create further chaos in my house. Bring her here. I'll call the Malana, and the Nikah can take place right now." And with that, he didn't wait for a reply. He turned and calmly walked away to his room. My husband and his brother fell silent, and even the men who had stormed in just minutes earlier seemed taken aback. Their fury had shifted into calculation. They nodded and said they would return shortly, and left. My husband cast a brief look at me and gestured for me to return to my room. Just thinking about the whole scene made my blood run cold. I felt something sinister creeping around me, like danger was closing in. I was convinced now my father-in-law wouldn't escape consequences this time, but it seemed that his enormous wealth still had the power to quiet every voice. Not long after, the sound of unfamiliar male voices echoed through the house again. They had returned, this time with the Malana and presumably the bride. I was still wrestling with whether to go outside or stay in when my husband entered the room. Without much emotion, he looked at me and said, "Come outside. The women are here. Agnès, you need to host them." Then he added with a warning glare, "And don't say anything foolish." I wanted to stop him and ask what exactly was happening, but he was already storming out, riding on his authority like the wind. He came, gave orders, and left. I quickly pulled out a clean outfit, changed my clothes, and stepped into the lounge. Just as he said, 4 or 5 women were seated in one corner of the lounge. Another woman sat with them, her head covered by a long veil. I approached them, greeted them politely, and introduced myself, but they looked at me with eyes full of disgust, and rightly so. After all, it was my father-in-law who had destroyed the life of one of their girls. There was no forgiveness for that, and there shouldn't be. Moments later, the Malana also arrived, and right there, in front of the witnesses and God, my father-in-law was married to a stranger, the very woman whose life he had ruined, the girl he had assaulted. He was now pretending to support her by marrying her, as if it were an act of compassion. I was burning inside, wanting nothing more than to lash out at both my father-in-law and my husband. But I was completely helpless. I came from a respectable family too, and if I dared to speak even a word, my husband would treat me harshly. He had made it crystal clear on the very first night of our marriage. He would not tolerate a single word spoken against his father. I could say what I wanted to him, but not a word about his father. "He is everything to us," my husband had said. "He runs our household. He's the reason you have your job. If you ever stand against him, you'll be left with nothing." And I didn't want to lose this comfortable life I had just entered. So I kept silent. After the Nikah, the girl was left in our house, just like that, and the family of the victim, after verbally lashing out at my father-in-law, left. Though he was around 55 years old, his behavior was no different from that of a young man in his 20s. He took great care of his appearance, drinking warm milk and eating almonds at night, eating fruit instead of bread or paratha in the morning, and sipping fresh juice. Even at lunch, he stuck to a strict diet. That's why at 55, he looked no older than 45. I was still sitting in the lounge when my husband, wanting to speak privately with his father, gave me a look and told me to escort the new bride to his father's room. I quietly approached the woman who still had her face covered. I gently held her arm and led her toward the room. A part of me wanted to speak with her, to ask her something, but I had no words. I couldn't even process what was happening. My father-in-law at this age getting married, and to someone who should have been the age of his son. As I helped her settle into the room and was about to leave, she suddenly grabbed my hand and asked, "Where are you going?" Her voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned around, surprised. Her voice was so youthful. It didn't match the image of an older woman I had in my mind. I told her to lift her veil. When she slowly lifted it and I saw her face, the ground slipped from beneath me. She wasn't an older woman at all. She was a young girl, barely 25 years old. I stared at her in shock, unable to say a word. Before I could ask her anything, there was a knock at the door. I turned to see my husband standing there, motioning for me to come out. I walked over to him, silently, and he grabbed my wrist and led me toward another room. The moment we stepped inside, I turned to him and asked with disbelief in my voice, "Farouk, what is going on? Do you know what your father has done? That girl, she's not some older woman. She's a young girl. She must be 25 or 26. What is all this?" But he looked at me and without blinking said, "I told you on the first night of our marriage, stay out of my father's matters. Whatever he does is his decision. If he chose to get married, that's his right. It was by mutual consent. You and I have no say in it, so it's better if you stay silent." I looked at him in utter disbelief, trying to make sense of what he was saying. I wanted to tell him that he was defending the indefensible, that his father had assaulted a 25-year-old girl and destroyed her life. But he simply didn't care. "You should take serious action." But my voice was paralyzed. I knew that if I said even a single word against them, my husband would throw me out of the house immediately. So I chose silence, thinking it was the safer option. That night was deeply unsettling. My mind kept drifting back to that 25-year-old girl, the one now locked away in my father-in-law's room. I wanted to leave everything behind and run away, but I was helpless. I had lost both my parents in childhood and my brothers, though they had arranged my marriage, were all married and had their own families now. Where would I even go? Whose home would I turn to? What could I see? So I remained quiet, swallowing every scream that welled up inside me. The next morning, the sun rose in its full glory. I hadn't yet stepped out of my room when suddenly there was loud, desperate banging on our bedroom door. It was her, the girl my father-in-law had married. Her voice was shaky, trembling with fear. I looked at my husband, startled, and rushed to open the door. There she stood, disheveled, broken, helpless. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes swollen with tears. The moment she saw me, she hid behind me and burst into tears, sobbing, "Please save me from that man. He said he'll kill me. He told me I won't leave here alive. He does this to everyone. I don't want to die. I want to go home. How did I end up here?" Her voice was choking with fear. Her tears flowed nonstop. I was frozen, unable to process what she was saying. She was terrified. I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and tried to comfort her. "No one is going to hurt you. Don't think like this. You're safe here. What's happened is in the past. Try to start a new life," I told her gently. But she shook my hand off and bolted toward the door, desperate to escape. She hadn't yet reached it when my father-in-law came striding down the hallway toward us. My mind went blank. My husband, meanwhile, lay in bed turned to the other side, as if none of this chaos existed. The moment my father-in-law saw the girl, he barked, "Didn't I tell you to stay away from my daughter-in-law and my son? Can't you understand a simple instruction?" His anger startled me. She was a new bride, and this was how he treated her? I couldn't bear it. I wanted to say something, but before I could, my husband's voice echoed from behind me. "Sania, come inside. And Baba, take this girl away. She's disturbing us for no reason. What kind of drama is this, early in the morning?" His tone was cold and dismissive, like he wasn't talking about a human being, but a troublesome toy or a nuisance animal. I looked at him in disbelief. His lack of empathy cut through me. Just as I was about to say something, my father-in-law grabbed his young bride by the arm and said, Son, close your door. No one will bother you now. I'll handle this properly. With that, he pulled the girl forward. She let out a piercing scream. I wanted to slam the door shut, pretend I hadn't seen anything, but the way that girl screamed, it shattered something inside me. For the first time, I felt a strange ache in my heart for her. I rushed forward, panic written all over my face, and pleaded with my father-in-law, "Please, Baba, don't do this. She's terrified. God forbid something happens to her. People will accuse us of harming her. Please be sensible." But he wasn't listening. He wasn't even considering letting go of her hand. His brows were furrowed with rage, and it looked like he could explode at any moment. And then, in that moment, I finally understood everything. Sometimes in situations like this, girls panic beyond measure and end up harming themselves. I was certain my father-in-law had forced himself on her that night. That's why, by morning, she was desperate to escape. My father-in-law looked at me sternly and said, "Benish, don't you understand what I'm saying? Go to your room and spend time with my son. I'll take care of this woman. This is exactly the kind of drama these women create. I know their type too well. Her family caused a scene in my home. She will pay the price for that, no matter what." His tone was laced with arrogance, his words filled with venom. "I am Sarfaraz Khanzada," he said with pride. "Do they think we are some helpless, nameless people that they can walk in and insult us however they want? No, I won't just sit back and take it." Before I could say another word, my husband came forward and grabbed my arm. With cold eyes, he glared at me and said, "Didn't I explain it to you yesterday? Don't get involved. Baba, please take her. I'll deal with my wife." The girl kept screaming, crying, pleading, but neither my father-in-law nor my husband showed an ounce of mercy. Right in front of my eyes, my father-in-law dragged that innocent girl back into his room, ignoring her tears and screams. And I couldn't do a thing. That helplessness, it tore me apart. I turned to my husband, burning with rage. "You have no humanity left in you. A woman is sobbing, terrified, begging for help, and you're just watching? We should be helping her. She's been wronged. But you've become like pharaohs," I yelled, unable to control myself. "I'm ashamed to even call you my husband." I didn't hold back. I said everything my heart was screaming. But before I could finish, my husband raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. It stung like fire. He looked at me coldly and said, "If you don't know how to speak properly, then don't speak at all." I stared at him in disbelief. We had only been married for 2 months. In that short time, we had built a good friendship, even shared laughter. But this behavior, I couldn't recognize him anymore. I was in pain, not just from the slap, but from everything, from the silence, from the injustice, from the fact that I wanted to help a helpless girl and instead I was being punished for it. My heart wanted to pack up and return to my parental home. But what was the point? My parents were no longer alive, and without them, I had no strength to walk back into my brother's homes. So I remained silent. I cut off all conversation with my husband and quietly sat alone in the lounge trying to control my tears. He looked at me with contempt, then walked back into the bedroom. Every part of my body was trembling. I felt like crying until I couldn't breathe. Everything that had happened in the last day had crushed my soul. Sometime later, my husband came back out of the room and looked at me. "Don't sit out here," he said coldly. "Go back to the bedroom. If that girl comes out again, you'll get caught up in sympathy again. And I don't want my father getting angry at me because of you." Hearing those words, I wanted to shout, to scream at him, to ask where his sense of humanity had gone. What had happened to the man I had married? But it all felt pointless now. He didn't care. Not anymore. So I quietly stood up and went to my room. I didn't want to destroy my home over a stranger, but inside I was breaking. My husband shouldn't have slapped me. That thought kept repeating in my mind. Eventually, I drifted into a heavy sleep, exhausted from all the crying. Time kept moving slowly. It was Sunday. Everyone in the house woke up late. I stayed on the bed, silent. Around 1 in the afternoon, my husband came close to me while I lay still, pretending to sleep. Suddenly, he wrapped his arm gently around my waist and pulled me toward him, whispering in a voice dripping with affection, "My love, forgive me. I didn't mean to raise my hand. It just happened in a moment of anger." His sweet murmur made my heart skip a beat. I turned my face and saw that same familiar gaze, full of love, fixed on me. A part of me wanted to fight him, to argue, but I don't know why. Tears welled up in my eyes instead, and I broke down into sobs right on his chest. He held me with such tenderness, soothing me as I cried. He kissed my forehead with a warmth that made everything else blur away. In just a few moments, he had drawn me into his arms and taken me to a world far from all the pain. I truly loved my husband. The day his proposal came, I was overjoyed. He was very handsome, and his family came from Pashtun roots. And Pashtuns, as people say, are gifted with beauty by Allah himself. Time passed. Around 3 in the afternoon, I stepped out of the room with him. The maid had already prepared breakfast, but the moment I looked at the scene before me, my soul felt like it was about to leave my body. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Could my father-in-law really have fallen so low? His new wife, the girl, was sitting on the floor by his feet, while he sat casually on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. She looked devastated. Her face was stained with tears that hadn't stopped flowing. The sight was unbearable. I turned to look at my husband, who simply shook his head to signal me not to say a word. The message was clear. Stay silent. So, I said nothing. I didn't want to destroy my life by interfering in someone else's matter. That very morning, I had been slapped by my husband because of this girl. Despite our seemingly deep friendship and understanding as husband and wife, something inside me had changed forever after what happened today. My heart had grown colder. I followed my husband quietly to the kitchen. I served him the breakfast the maid had prepared and sat down beside him to eat. We had only just begun eating when suddenly, we heard my father-in-law's panicked voice calling out from the other room. He was shouting for my husband. Startled, both of us rushed outside. The moment we saw the scene before us, my mind froze. I knew this was bound to happen. It had been building since the morning. Just by looking at the girl, it was clear. She would never accept a life with my father-in-law, nor would she ever accept this family. The way she had broken down earlier was proof enough that sooner or later she would either harm herself or run away. And now, there she stood, trembling and furious, holding a knife in her hand, staring at my father-in-law with tear-filled eyes. Her voice shook with rage and grief as she shouted, "Divorce me, right now. I can't live another moment with a filthy man like you. You're not a human. You're an animal who doesn't even understand the meaning of a woman's honor. You pretended to help me, but it was all a lie. May Allah ruin you. May your daughters face what I faced. Only then you'll know what you've done. Allah will never forgive you. You'll suffer a miserable life with no escape." Her words sliced through the air like fire. But my father-in-law kept repeating just one line. "Let's sit and talk. I'll treat you better. I won't get angry again. Please put down the knife. Don't create a scene in my house." But she was uncontrollable. My husband quickly signaled me to step in and try to calm her. I was terrified. If she harmed herself, the blame would fall on the entire family, and now that included me too. I stepped forward carefully and looked at her. "Listen, I understand your pain," I said softly. "No one can understand what you're going through more than I do," I said gently. "But ending your life is the worst mistake you could make. Don't you know that Allah has forbidden suicide? If you take your life, He will send you straight to hell. Please, think clearly." Hearing my words, she trembled and shouted, "How wonderful! God has forbidden death, but His people have made life unbearable. Don't interfere with me. I'll only find peace if I end myself today. I came to you this morning too, but you only saw your own relationship, not my pain, so why should I listen to you now?" She stood there with the knife pressed to her wrist, trembling, breath heaving. Just then, 2 men entered the house, her family. They rushed forward, alarmed, and one of them cried out, "Sakina, what are you doing? Get a hold of yourself!" They were clearly her brothers, but Sakina just shook her head stubbornly and screamed, "I told you not to marry me to that man. I begged you." But you didn't listen. You saw the money, the cars, the house, and changed your minds. You sold me out. And now you want to save me? I won't let anyone else play with me. I'm not some toy you can toss around. Do you think I'll stay silent forever? You don't know who I am. I felt my body shivering like a dry leaf in the wind. I had never witnessed anything like this in my entire life. My breath was caught in my chest as if someone had taken the air away. I stepped forward, joined my hands, and pleaded, Sakina, for God's sake, calm down. If anything happens to you, how will we face the world? Think rationally. Your death won't change anything. People will cry for a day or two and then move on with their lives. So don't do this. If you can't stay with my father-in-law, ask for a divorce, but please don't hurt yourself. But Sakina kept shaking her head, repeating just one thing. Give me a divorce right now, or I'll slit my wrist. From the way she was speaking, it was clear. If anyone said anything else, if my husband or father-in-law so much as opened their mouths, she would go through with it. Her brothers were desperately trying to calm her, to hold her back, but she kept spiraling further. Finally, they looked at my father-in-law with tired, broken eyes and said plainly, Please give her a divorce. We'll take her with us. We don't want to lose our sister. Whatever you did, may God deal with you. But right now, we don't want her to die. Quickly. Just say the words, please. I stood there, dazed and devastated. And then, it happened. My father-in-law spoke those 3 words, the words that ended everything. I divorce you. They say when divorce is uttered on earth, the throne of God trembles in the heavens. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The moment those words hit Sakina's ears, she silently dragged the blade across her wrist. As her eyes began to fade, she whispered, I have no one left. This society won't accept me. My own family won't accept me. Even if I go home, I'll be haunted with taunts for the rest of my life. It's better I return to my lord. Fi amanillah, she murmured, and then she softly recited the Shahada. Her eyes closed. Every hair on my body stood on end. I screamed and collapsed into my husband's arms, unconscious. I couldn't take it anymore. The shock, the pain, it was beyond comprehension. When I regained consciousness, I was still in my husband's arms. Everyone else was frozen like statues, staring at Sakina, unable to comprehend how such a storm had suddenly entered our home. A few moments later, her brothers snapped out of their daze and tried shaking her awake. But it was too late. In a way, only one thing had been done right. My father-in-law had given the divorce right in front of her brothers. But what followed was a moment that none of us would ever forget. After that day, Sakina ended her life. And just like that, my father-in-law walked away from the case completely unscathed and with his so-called honor intact. Sakina's family took her body and quietly left. But for me, what happened was enough to tear through my soul. I was deeply, deeply grieved. That girl didn't deserve what happened to her. Her desperate cries haunted me, the way she had begged me, "Save me from this man, he'll kill me." Those words echoed in my ears over and over. I often thought, if only I had helped her. If only I hadn't handed her over to him. Maybe she would still be alive. But perhaps that was what fate had written for her. And they say, what is written in fate cannot be changed by anyone. Time passed slowly. I forgot how to laugh, how to speak. It felt as though Sakina had taken all the joy from my life with her. My husband tried to talk to me, to lift my spirits, but I couldn't utter a single word. I would just sit quietly and look at him. I didn't understand what kind of trial had suddenly entered my life. Weeks passed. Almost an entire month went by before I began to regain some sense of normalcy. During this time, my husband supported me a lot. Moment by moment, he wrapped me in his care and affection. They say that when a woman becomes emotionally unwell, many men send her back to her parental home, but my husband never did that. He held me close. He told me, I'm with you until my last breath. You don't need to worry. Life brings its ups and downs, and if we can endure them together, that's our true victory. But if we fail the test, then we'll spend the rest of our lives in sorrow. That day, after a whole month, I finally smiled again. And we went out together. We went shopping and later had dinner. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive again beside him. But when we returned home, my father-in-law appeared before us in a dreadful state. The moment my husband saw him, he seemed to immediately understand something. He quickly ordered me to go to our room and pulled his father aside into a corner of the house. I stood there, confused. I had no idea what was going on. For a moment, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Had my father-in-law done something again? Sometimes the worst things we imagine turn out to be true. A few minutes later, my husband came into the room. His shoulders slumped, his face clearly troubled. I looked at him and asked gently, "Furkan, what's wrong? Are you okay? You look very disturbed." He glanced at me once, shook his head silently, and lay down on the bed. Just before entering the house, he had been so cheerful. We'd spent a lovely day together, and I hadn't seen him smile that much in weeks, but now his silence was suffocating. I kept calling his name, asking what had happened, but he said nothing, and that silence was eating away at me. Time passed. Somehow, we got through that night. The next morning, he woke up early and left the room. As always, I woke up with him. I had a habit of never sleeping alone. I sat up immediately and followed him out of the room. But he turned to me and instructed me to go back inside and then left. I had no idea where. I stayed up. Since I was already awake, I thought perhaps I should just go ahead and prepare breakfast. But just as I was about to go to the kitchen, strange noises started coming from outside our main gate. It sounded like someone was throwing stones at the door, and the guards were shouting, trying to chase them away. I felt as if someone had tightly squeezed my heart. Immediately, my father-in-law and brother-in-law came out of their rooms and walked toward the door. I followed them with my dupatta neatly placed over my head. As soon as the door opened, 4 men were standing there, shouting loudly and abusing my father-in-law. I was completely shocked. What was going on? My father-in-law shouted back in a loud voice, "There's no need to shout outside our house. If you have something to say, come inside and talk. But if you create more drama at my doorstep, I'll call the police right now and destroy all of you. You don't know the power I have." His attitude hadn't changed at all, even though what had happened in our family just a month ago was no small matter. He should have changed his ways, but no, he was still filled with the same pride and arrogance. I felt like yelling at him, but again I chose to stay silent. Maybe those men understood what he said, because they quietly came inside. My brother-in-law looked at me and asked in a questioning tone, "Bobby, where is Bhai? Call him out quickly. Baba has created another problem again." His voice was rushed. I immediately replied, "Bhai went out for some work. I don't know what all this is about. Is everything okay?" He nodded slightly and followed his father inside. Those 5 men who entered were the same ones cursing my father-in-law outside. I understood everything in an instant. He had done it again. The maid had once told me that my father-in-law had done this kind of thing before. He would take advantage of young girls and then, in the name of sympathy, marry them. But no girl ever stayed with him. Some left within a month, others within 10 days, and some just after a day. Seeing this happen again made my eyes fill with tears. I felt deep regret in my heart about which kind of family I had married into. No doubt, my husband was a good man. His personality reflected decency. He had never done anything wrong and loved me a lot, but still, he was his father's son, and all this would reflect on him too. I stood quietly watching everything. This time, my father-in-law had harmed an orphan girl, only 15 years old, and she was a hafiza of the Quran. Tears filled my eyes. My heart felt like it would break from the pain. Only a girl can truly understand another girl's pain. God forbid. If I had been in her place, what would I have gone through? I quietly went to my room and started crying hard. Just like before, my father-in-law showed fake sympathy, married that 15-year-old orphan, and brought her home. When I saw her for the first time, I felt something very strange inside me. The girl looked very innocent. She was wearing a white dress, and with a red dupatta over her head, she walked into the house with my father-in-law. Today, my father-in-law's smile just wouldn't leave his face. After a while, my husband came home too. And from the expression on his face, I immediately understood that he knew everything. He had gone to meet someone for business. And during the night, my father-in-law had told him the whole story. As always, my husband supported his father, but maybe this time, God was not on my father-in-law's side. The girl my father-in-law had harmed wasn't just anyone. She was an orphan, and on top of that, a pious girl who had memorized the Quran. I wanted to stop what was happening. I wanted to speak up and say, "Don't hurt this girl. At least give her a few days." But my father-in-law was blinded by desire. He took that 15-year-old girl into his room without thinking about anything. But at that very moment, Allah's punishment came down. The next morning, when we all woke up, we saw that same girl sitting quietly in the lounge. She had her eyes closed and was reciting Surah Yasin from the Quran in a peaceful voice. I smiled at her innocence and walked toward her. I wanted to ask her something, but she didn't even look at me. When she finished reading, she opened her eyes, looked at me calmly, and said, "Go and check on that man. Maybe he's not even alive anymore." Her tone was strange. Just then, my husband came out of the room. As soon as he heard her words, he rushed inside. My father-in-law had suffered a stroke. It was so serious that he died right there and then. I stood frozen, covering my mouth in shock. His whole body had stiffened. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt like I was watching Allah's justice with my own eyes. When Allah gives someone time, they think they can do whatever they want. But when He decides enough is enough, He doesn't wait. No matter how much someone begs at that moment, it's too late. My husband, my brother-in-law, everyone was in panic. Even the doctors seemed disturbed. One of them even said, "This kind of stroke only happens to people who carry something very heavy in their hearts." That girl continued living in our house. No one said a word to her, not my husband, not my brother-in-law. We all understood that this girl was not ordinary. She was always busy in prayer and worship. I used to look at her and quietly pray in my heart, "Ya Allah, please don't ever let my husband become like his father." Even now, whenever I remember my father-in-law's final moments, I get chills. That day I realized, when Allah decides to punish, no one can stop Him.